Hello and welcome back, everybody. Max here as usual. Today we are talking about chapter 13.7, the proxy war in Ukraine. This will be another doozy of a chapter full with interesting information and facts. This is a very important chapter because if you haven't understood what's occurring in Ukraine and the reason behind this special military operation, which is currently still ongoing, all this information is very important for you to hear because mainstream media has, as usual, covered everything up and has not presented us with the truth. So today I will tell you the truth. And it's shocking to say the least. And of course, as everything else in this book, it leads back to the usual suspects and the usual club, namely the Khazarian mafia. And that will be abundantly clear after you hear this chapter. Usual housekeeping issues here. Please find the Amazon page where you can find the book. Support me there. Our YouTube channel, where all the podcast series is posted. Please like and subscribe. The Rumble channel and our Brighteon channel. Please help me spread the word. It's important. You can find my cryptocurrency wallets in the description below the video. If anybody would feel to donate, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you very much. Now, war has been the favorite pastime for humanity as long as we can remember. It's an atrocious activity and only serves to demonstrate the lack of understanding, humility, and absolute lack of empathy that has engulfed humankind for far too long. Most of the realm agrees wholeheartedly that war efforts of any kind are not agreeable in any way, shape, or form. We have finally evolved to a species where we start to see through the veil of deception and treachery, and are finally waking up and being aware of its implications to us as a collective. Almost all wars since Napoleon have started with an underlying agenda. Yes, I mean all, no exceptions. It's been proven, and I have demonstrated in this book, how dark powers from the Khazarian mafia has constantly meddled in the background in every conflict we know of. It's a banker's war, they say, and it's as true today as it was back then. The CIA, Mossad, and MI6, even the KGB back in the day, were all involved in manipulations of elections, overthrow of legitimate governments, and assassinations galore. The CIA has become the go-to agency when the billionaire class... Sorry, I got lost there for a second. When the billionaire class cannot penetrate the corridors of power of any given government, the CIA then sends out their economic hitmen to corrupt, threaten, and coerce presidents or prime ministers to play ball or else. This has been going on since World War II, or even longer. I would strongly recommend to read Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins, this book right here. He has also made a series of interviews that can be found online, a very interesting man with some very interesting stories to tell. If the hitman failed, it was time for the big guns, either through assassination or simply by a military takeover. The US military has been at war since its inception. No country in the known world has invaded and taken over as many countries, all under the pretext of spreading democracy. Democracy that the invaded countries never asked for in the first place. After the takeover, in comes the World Bank with loan guarantees, always with the same caveat that American companies will exploit the resources and multinationals enter the territory and destroy the economy from within. Happens every single time. The debt obviously can never be paid off, and they are hooked in debt in perpetuity. The money always flows back up to the Rothschilds and company. American hegemony has operated this way for a very long time, and it's absolutely time to stop this sort of behavior. I've explained before how the US empire is being dismantled on all fronts, and it's already a zombie state of sorts. The next rational steps for the alliance would be to neuter the Khazarian mafia bankers and their power and influence elsewhere, in their home base. Ukraine, and last but not least, Israel, where the real satanic power lies. I start by showing you a very important cube post here, showing us that the alliance is bigger than anyone imagined. It mentions China, Russia, and Trump as an alliance to take down the New World Order. You can see on your screen here, the post is from November 11, 2017, post number 140. Here in the red square it says, "Where did POTUS receive while visiting China?" What did POTUS receive, sorry? Where did POTUS dine? What is the significance? What if China, Russia, and others are coordinating with POTUS to eliminate the New World Order? Where did POTUS dine? Well, we spoke about that in previous chapters, didn't we? He dined in the Forbidden City, the first president ever to do that. That tells us something important. So what I'm about to describe to you now is the culmination of that activity. And Russia is the center point and the bagman in this ongoing operation. We mentioned before how Q posted "Save Israel for last." And as of this recording, Israel is digging themselves into a hole without end. They will be no more very soon. The new nation of Judea will arise, from what I have heard. We shall see how this unfolds. But I would love to be correct on this point. But first, let's discuss the first nations that requires a cleansing and a good spanking, namely Ukraine. We will start here with a laugh, but with a very serious undertone. Here we have the actor Woody Harrelson speaking at some kind of event. Let's see what he has to say on the matter.
I'm the kind of guy who just thinks it's abominable when a superpower with all this military might, with no provocation, attacks a country that is, Iraq. I'm sorry, Korea. No, sorry, Ukraine. Terrible.
Yeah, we need to laugh in order not to cry. I mentioned in the beginning of the book and in this podcast series in the first show how this one symbol that you see on your screen now will come back later. Well, here it is again, the Khazarian Tamka, and how it is exactly the same as a sigil of Moloch and the crest of Ukraine. This entire chapter will describe and explain to you why that is, finally. It's not coincidence that Ukraine uses this logo. Ukraine is their homeland, the land the Russian Tsar kicked them out of all those years ago. The country next door, Kazakhstan, was also part of their empire, all satanic, all dark, and very evil. Hopefully, that's not the case anymore. I mentioned in the beginning of this book how the Russian Tsar in the day expelled the satanic Khazars from their home country, and thus they spread around the world, reorganized and took over world power silently in the background ever since, promising to take their revenge on Russia ever since. This has been clearly explained before. It now does appear very clearly that the Russians, with Putin at the helm, is back to finish the job once and for all. Finishing the job they should have done 1,000 years ago. The world would have looked very differently today if they had eliminated this threat back then. The war in this backward country did not start recently. The territory has been under serious observation for some time. And we know a lot more now after the country was invaded, so to speak, by Putin. There is a tsunami of information coming to the surface lately. Q made sure that we knew, if we bothered to look. There are several aspects that need to be explained regarding the Ukraine issue. And they are adrenochrome harvesting, biolabs and international biological terrorism, money laundering of proportions never before imagined, underground tunnel networks that I will explain to you later, child and human trafficking, and organ harvesting. One needs to understand that all the crimes mentioned here are currently occurring in Ukraine and are financed and sponsored by the Khazarian mafia through its cronies placed in political power in the West. The Democratic Party in the US is especially involved in money laundering and other unspeakable crimes in the territory of Ukraine. One of many issues that has emerged is the crypto scandal with the crypto exchange FTX. The party, the Democratic Party that is, funneled enormous amounts of money through this network, and FTX laundered it back to the party in cash to support the political campaigns. This has been proven in court, and the media is completely silent. I wonder why. Now let's start looking at this short video explaining the adrenochrome part and its connection to Ukraine, and then we take it from there on the other side.
Enter adrenochrome, the rumored secret Illuminati drug. Technically, it's a chemical compound produced in the human body when adrenaline oxidizes. Adrenochrome is known to cause extreme hallucinations and feelings of empowerment and euphoria. How is the chemical extracted? A victim is terrorized, either being tortured or knowing they're going to be sacrificed, increasing the amount of adrenaline that is flowing through their body. They are then killed, and the adrenochrome is collected with a syringe from the base of the neck or spinal column. A human victim only produces around 10 cc's of adrenochrome, so once it's collected, the drug can be sold on the deep black market and corners of the dark web at exorbitant prices.
Adrenochrome is created by the pineal gland when a human is fearing for their life. It is said to stop the aging process or slow down the aging process. Until someone stops using it, then they rapidly age to the age that they should look, or worse. It's very popular in the elite Illuminati circles. The cabal learned that children were the best extraction source for the highest potency adrenochrome. The younger, the better. As people get older, the concentration and the potency of the adrenochrome declines, and the more terrified a person was determined how potent the adrenochrome that their pineal gland created. It's probably the most expensive drug in the world, and very rare. Because it is so very expensive, only the richest people, celebrities, billionaires, can afford it.
Whether human or animal, blood sacrifice has long been part of the rituals of many cultures, and it was discovered that after consuming the fresh adrenaline-saturated blood of a terrified victim, participants would experience a type of high off of the adrenaline, which could include increased senses, hallucinations, and feelings of euphoria, sometimes assigning a supernatural causality to the effects. Eventually, the precise timing was worked out, so that the victim would be killed at the moment the maximum amount of adrenaline had been pumped into the body. This knowledge was passed down through secret societies, ancient mystery schools, and intergenerational satanic cults.
When they torture the children, it causes a physical reaction of the endomorphins in your body to just increase because of the terror and the pain. So when the Satanists drink the blood, they actually get like a chemical, a high, like a drug high from the blood of a tortured victim.
These entities are feeding off human energy. And one of the things that they do is when they're sacrificing somebody, Satanists and the bloodlines, they'll drink the blood because when the terror reaches a certain point in the ritual, a certain adrenaline goes in the blood, which gives these people a high. I mean, sick is not the word. But on another level, an energetic level, the entities are feeding off the energy coming off of terror and fear.
Most satanic sacrifices include some consumption of the blood, and possibly even body parts. Even more disturbingly, some of these groups make a point of preferring the blood of children, believing it to be more potent. Another reason the elite drink children's blood is for its known rejuvenating effects. Why do you think some of these old Illuminati Satanists live so long?
It turns out that drinking children's blood is an anti-aging device. This is just really sick and disgusting, but it's a fact. It's a chemical fact. And if you drink adrenalized children's blood, which is to say you terrorize the child, not just with sodomy, but with torture and with other satanic ritual things, if you adrenalize the child's blood before you kill them and drink their blood, this is a doubly effective anti-aging device. You can also harvest children's bone marrow. So children are being killed for their bone marrow as an anti-aging device for the elite. I don't make this stuff up. It's gone on throughout history. This is not new.
Today, many of the satanic elite are addicted to drinking adrenalized blood.
Any animal that is tortured at the time of its death secretes all this adrenochrome. And that is this power. It's a drug. It is a drug. And these people are addicted to it. And they also believe, anyway, that they have increased power. And perhaps they do.
Numerous survivors have attested to satanic sects engaging in ritualistic consumption of adrenalized blood, experiencing a high from the adrenaline.
When they go to murder a child, they make sure the child is terrified, so they pump the adrenaline through the blood. And they like to drink that blood, and they're addicted to adrenaline, a lot of them. So there's actually a science, when you analyse it, there's a science behind their madness.
There were 26 biolabs set up by the CIA in Ukraine. Over 2/3 of the 26 were not set up for making dangerous gain of research pathogens, but was the hub of, you guessed it, adrenochrome production. Ukraine was the hub of one of the most abundant human trafficking spots on the planet. That shouldn't shock the world. It's one of the most corrupt countries on the planet. The brutal truth is that Ukraine was the biggest producer of adrenochrome in the world. This would explain why all the secrecy and why 90% of all the paid mercenaries have walked off their jobs recently. And some have even shifted sides to help the alliance of nations. And Ukraine is defeated. So this is a big part of the puzzle that is being revealed to the world. You're going to hear about it from others. I wonder how many of the U.S.-funded biolabs was actually making this adrenochrome product. This was for the most expensive drug on the planet. And they also got a way to make its generic form, a synthetic adrenochrome. And I want you to guess what is the most popular used drug to cut the synthetic adrenochrome with. You guessed it, fentanyl. So it all ties together. It's the biggest cover-up about Ukraine, guys. And what makes it so terrible is that these criminals, these demons, were actually funding all of this with your money. And I'm not just talking about American money, money from all over the world. All these countries that the intelligence agencies are in and the cabal is in have been using your money to do their dirt and make more money. They steal your money to put it into opportunities, should I say, to create an industry that makes them trillions of dollars each year. And I'm not going to get into the pain and suffering of all the human trafficking. When Americans find this out, they're going to be pretty pissed off also. So prepare yourself, guys. It's a sad day for this world that we allowed these few, just a small group of idiots, criminals, to conduct human trafficking, torture, and the production of a drug. All I know is that in its original form, it comes from torture, and mostly of small children.
So that's as dark as it gets, don't you think? A good and jolly way to start this discussion today. So now that we've established the link between the adrenochrome and trafficking and the biolabs, let us explore in more detail and see what we actually can gather here. It seems very natural to me that the Khazarian mafia would do everything in their power to establish a presence in the ancestral lands, and so they did, a long time ago. If the media was not so hopelessly corrupt and Khazarian mafia owned, articles like the ones I will show you here would have continued to be seen after the military operation started. But that was not the case now, was it? All of this precious information was memory holed and scrubbed from the public in order to maintain the narrative Ukraine good, Putin bad, and the media has bended backwards to defend this narrative to this day. At this point, it's beyond absurd. What you see on your screen here is how the West was covering Ukraine before the war. Ukrainian president's rule becomes increasingly corrupt, authoritarian. Welcome to Ukraine, the most corrupt nation in Europe. Ukraine's deadly profession, 3 journalists attacked in July. And the biggest one, Ukraine's neo-Nazi problem. You don't say. We had articles like this. Here you have Western media before February 2022. What is the symbol that is highlighted here in all these pictures? We see swastikas all over the place, don't we? Very interesting indeed. We had pictures like this. Swastikas all over the place, right? And interesting for me to note, on the left side here, where you have Zelensky in the center with a swastika, the bottom right corner of that picture, you have the Star of David and the flag of Israel. I wonder why that is. Isn't that interesting? So before February 22, everybody was talking about the Nazi problem, as I show you here. And after February 22, Slava Ukraini, save Ukraine. And the media went on and on and on. But the fact of the matter is that the Ukraine has an enormous Nazi problem. These lunatics are actual real Nazis in the definition that media has taught us. Bad Nazis, that is. But they have absolutely nothing to do with the National Socialists in Germany during the war that I described to you in detail in this podcast. This group, also called the Banderistas, are a CIA creation that was put in place many years ago to manage the country and work as an internal force to maintain Khazarian mafia control of the territory. This is a really nasty bunch of hooligans, and they must be eliminated. Russia is targeting them, and it appears that they are no longer breathing in this very moment, for sure. Zelensky, the current puppet president, cocaine addict, and God knows what else, he is one of them, and he answers to them directly. The media on these issues? Crickets. Not a word. Let me describe to you what the media and the politicians of the West have forgotten during this timeline. In 2014, there was a CIA-planned coup in Ukraine, led by the demon creature Victoria Nuland that we mentioned before, and the CIA. They stole the elections from democratically elected Viktor Yanukovych, who won the elections fair and square. Yanukovych was a Russian sympathizer, and the Americans could not have any of that. So they orchestrated, with the help from the usual CIA-financed NGOs, that just happened to emerge in nations where the governments plan a little bit too much liberty. They planned a color revolution, as they call it. The Americans went all in on this one. Nuland traveled there personally and instigated the crowds to take back power from their elected president. So did no-name John McCain. You can find all of this videos online if you do your own research. Media was at the time foaming at the mouth. And as an actual massacre occurred on Maidan Square in the center of Kiev, we should have seen already back then that this was a staged operation. And knowing what we know now, we also know the reason. A new puppet president was installed after Yanukovych fled the country. Here I will show you the full list of prime ministers. It took them a while to find the right candidate that they could control properly, by blackmail and other things. His name is Zelensky, and he is an absolute controlled fool and cocaine addict. The man is absolutely bonkers. As absurd as it sounds, they built Zelensky up by making him play a role in a very popular TV series at the time, where he acted as president and cleaned out the corruption of the country. The TV series became the name of his party, Servant of the People. And it was very recognizable and said all the right things at the time. He won the people's trust. But it was all a show of sorts. You can't make this stuff up. It's a legendary scam. So basically, his TV show was his political campaign. Zelensky immediately proceeded with draconian measures, suspending parts of the constitution and banning media that did not agree with him. The warning signs were everywhere. And it was even shown here. The media was talking about this clearly at the time. So this wasn't any surprises for anybody. Now, he proceeded with the habitual bombings and terror attacks on the Russian-speaking population to the east. This had been occurring since 2014. In Donbass and Crimea, on orders of the Azov battalion and his Nazi handlers. These areas are extremely rich in natural resources and are very valuable to the Khazarian mafia bankers, BlackRock in particular. These areas has always been Russians historically, and its people have a deep-rooted connection with their motherland. They speak Russian and not Ukrainian. And so does Zelensky, by the way, but that is never mentioned, is it? Here I will show you what the Azov battalion is and their logo. You have blue and yellow, which are the colors of the Ukrainian flag. Down below you have the coat of arms of Ukraine, the Khazarian Tamga that we mentioned before. We have the waves representing Ukraine's long, rich history as a port country. We have the Wolfsnagel in the center, a German heraldic charge, inspired by historic wolf traps adopted by the Nazi Party, used prominently by the Wehrmacht and the SS unit. We have the black sun in the background. That's the most scary one of all. This is a variation of a sun wheel. It's an extremely popular and extensively used neo-Nazi white power extremist symbol, famously used on the armor and weapons of the Christchurch mosque shooter Brenton Tarrant, who killed 51 people and injured 40. So these are the kind of people and attitudes we're talking about here, okay? The Kiev administration harassed these people in the east for years, forcing them to abandon their traditions, language, and heritage, closing their Orthodox churches and arresting the priests. Now Putin, over in Moscow, started to worry and finally decided to take action. He asked the population of Crimea to have a referendum and choose if to exit Ukraine and join Russia in order to be defended. The referendum passed with a 99% vote to join Russia. The people had chosen to leave. It was not taken by Russia, as the media likes to say. That never happened, actually. What really happened was an annexation of the Crimean region with military presence in the area to defend it from Ukraine. As cherry on top, Russia now controlled the deep-sea port of Sevastopol that had historically been an important navy port for Russia's Black Sea Fleet, now back under their control. This was not an invasion. If the Ukrainian governments had not bombed Crimea ruthlessly for years, maybe the inhabitants would not have demanded to secede from the country. Just a question for the media to ponder, right? The entire world, fueled by the fake news media spun into actions with the whole Russia bad narrative and Ukraine did nothing wrong, painting Putin into some kind of warmongering lunatic, when the exact opposite was true. He was just defending his own people. You remember who did that exact thing and was called a Nazi lunatic in the past? Same procedure. History rhymes. Again, we're talking about Hitler here. This would eventually lead to what the Khazarian mafia had planned all along, a long war with Russia where the West could come in and save the day, move NATO into Ukraine and force government change in Russia once and for all, with Putin dead, of course, and steal its valuable resources. The Khazarian mafia's wet dream all along. The captured American politicians with people like Nuland and in particular, and the scumbag Lindsey Graham went on and on about how important it was to secure the Ukrainian borders. All the while, the US southern border was open for millions of illegals to flow over into the nation, sponsored by the Biden administration to come in and steal the votes in the coming election. It's astonishing what they have done, and the population is watching it and realizing finally that maybe all is just not what it seems in DC. I tend to agree. So now the memes, they just seem to write themselves. The masses are waking up to this. And that is great news. Q was right. You have to show them. This will be a good time in the writing to see what Lara Logan, Australian journalist and speaker, has to say on the whole issue. What she says in this video here is 100% truth. And she's been very vocal on this issue from day one. So let's play her short little clip here.
We're being corralled into this box where we either have to hate Vladimir Putin and believe everything evil that's said about him and love Ukraine, and there's no in between. And that reminds me a lot of you're either a white supremacist or you go with the Democrat narrative on everything under the sun.
The most lethal terrorist threat to the homeland today. White supremacy.
And I want to understand white rage, and I'm white.
I mean, there's as much interference here as you could possibly imagine. Before you even get to Hunter Biden, Nancy Pelosi, John Kerry, Mitt Romney, and all of their children who earn millions from Ukrainian gas companies. These days, it's hard to believe anything because they've lied about COVID, they lied about Russia collusion, they lied about the Ukraine impeachment trial, and there's so much more going on in Ukraine that nobody is talking about.
Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
My job as a journalist is to try to understand what is the truth here. I don't like being lied to, and we're being lied to on an epic scale. When we're told your only choice is you have to be 100% with Zelensky.
So,
Slava Ukraine, who's a puppet, who you can find on the internet in black stilettos and leather pants. Zelensky was selected, like so many of our leaders. And honestly, with big tech and with election fraud these days, we don't know how many leaders all around the world have been selected for us and weren't actually voted in.
How to build back better. We have to build back better. Build back better.
If Donald Trump gets the Republican nomination, there are many of us that will move heaven and earth to ensure he doesn't win.
We are fighting the same battles all over the world. To pretend that this war is about Russia and Ukraine is a barefaced lie. Putin has been warning for 15 years that he is not going to stand by while the globalists take over the world, build bioweapons facilities and whatever else they're doing in Ukraine. Ukraine has been a center of money laundering for many of the leaders in this country. Billions of US dollars have been laundered through Ukraine, and we say nothing about it. Does nobody question these things? We have an idiot like Lieutenant Colonel Vindman.
Mr. Vindman.
Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, please. Do you always insist on civilians calling you by your rank?
And sits there as a lieutenant colonel. He didn't even make colonel, and he's telling the president of the United States what his policy should be. You have a traitor in the form of Maria Yovanovitch, who was Obama's ambassador, who's telling Ukrainian government officials, don't listen to the will of the American people.
In his July 25th phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky, the president badmouthed Yovanovitch, calling her bad news.
I was shocked, absolutely shocked. And then she's given a cushy job for life at Georgetown University, and we're told that the president of the United States cannot say to his foreign counterparts that we want you to look into something.
If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. And they put in place someone who was solid.
So much hypocrisy and dishonesty here, and Ukraine is at the center of it all.
There we go. She speaks 100% truth. Everything she says actually has happened and can be verified. So there's no bullshit here. As I said before, the memes in this case, they write themselves. So what you see on your screen here, the blue part, is obviously Ukraine. And that's not our border. The red part is Russia, not America. And all the other countries, nope, not our concern, not here, nope, nope, and not America. Why is America involved in this in the first place? Why is NATO involved in this? Why is Europe involved in this? Ukraine is not a European country. It doesn't belong to the European Union. Why is everybody freaking out and sending them money and weapons for a country that is none of our business? Has never been and never will be. Look at it from that perspective and you understand how the Khazarian mafia operates. They cannot justify this action in any way, shape or form. Now the Ukrainians proceeded with bombing the Donbass region, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson with brutal force. These Ukrainian citizens had done nothing wrong except being of Russian descent. The Nazis wanted them out. So Putin gave them the same choice as the Crimeans, and a referendum was held. The result is what I show you on the screen right here. Does media ever report this? Of course not. Zaporizhia, 93%, Kherson, 87%, Luhansk, 98%, Donetsk, 99%. And you telling me that Russia invaded them? No, they chose to go with Russia. They chose to leave Ukraine because they were being bombarded by their own government, okay? That's a very important point that has never been mentioned in this discussion, and the media are memory holding this entire story. Now, these regions became Russian by popular vote. Then, and only then, did the Russian army enter the area to secure its defenses from the Ukrainian military that was shelling and bombing its own citizens. It's absolutely insane if you think about it now. We're talking about a government that is murdering its own nationals here with ballistic missiles in front of the entire world. What part of that is ever mentioned in the media? Never. Now the rest is history. As I'm writing this and talking to you today, most of Ukraine's defenses are absolutely shattered. The country is in absolute chaos. Zelensky is running around the world begging for money and arms, and the world is just tired of him. It's reported, when this was written, that over 700,000 Ukrainian men has perished in the fighting so far. The actual number is way over 1 million at this point. There's no men left in Ukraine anymore. And so far, Zelensky is so coked up that he barely knows where he's located most of the time. It's absolutely tragic that the West allows this to go on. Or is it? Russia has not once mentioned the objective of taking over the entirety of Ukraine. On the contrary, Putin has been very clear that he only wishes to protect the Russian-speaking citizens of the East, and he has no desire whatsoever to move further west unless he is forced to. You see, there's a second reason for Russia's involvement in this conflict. One it was unwillingly forced into. After World War II, when NATO was formed, Russia was never invited to join. Even if they, on several occasions, asked the West if they wanted it to join, they would have been happy to do so. This is a true and documented historical fact. After the Cold War, a deal was struck. NATO agreed not to move any further east by not including new members in the east of Europe. Membership in NATO means joint military and Western weaponry, including nukes, in the new member country. Russia did not want them on their borders, obviously. How did that promise hold up? Well, the West lied, of course, and added nation after nation until it became unbearable for the Russians to stand it any longer. Ukraine floating the idea of NATO membership was the last straw. Russia had been warning the West and the UN for decades about this. and they were completely ignored. So, as I said, the memes write themselves. If you look at your screen, you will see here the map of the world with Russia on top, the yellow part. Russia wants war. Look how close they put their country to our military bases. Yes, indeed. Why can't they just leave these people alone? Now, we should listen to historian and economist Jeffrey Sachs. This is not some conspiracy lunatic. He was a serious advisor to various administrations and deeply connected to the issue at hand. His word means something in this regard, and I fully support his opinion on this matter. I just need to look at his Wikipedia page below to understand that he is surely telling the truth. The more they discredit someone on a certain topic, the more assured you can be that is absolutely 100% over the target. Here is his Wikipedia page. Sustainable Development, Economic Development, Center for Sustainable Development. This guy has been an advisor to Ban Ki-moon. He was working together with the US Secretary General, Kofi Annan, etc., etc., etc. This man has a huge knowledge of the geopolitical situation in the world. And we will now listen to his interview where he explains the Ukrainian conflict in a very detailed manner and tells you the history behind it. Listen to this superhero tell it in his own words.
Let me just explain in 2 minutes the Ukraine war. This is not an attack by Putin on Ukraine in the way that we are told every day. This started in 1990, February 9th, 1990. James Baker III, our Secretary of State, said to Mikhail Gorbachev, NATO will not move 1 inch eastward if you agree to German unification, basically ending World War II. And Gorbachev said, that's very important. Yes, NATO doesn't move, and we agreed to German unification. The US then cheated on this, already starting in 1994, when Clinton signed off on basically a plan to expand NATO all the way to Ukraine. This is when the so-called neocons took power. And Clinton was the first agent of this. And the expansion of NATO started in 1999 with Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic. At that point, Russia didn't much care. There was no border other than with the Königsberg, but other than that, there was no direct threat. Then the US led the bombing of Serbia in 1999. That was bad, by the way. Because that was a use of NATO to bomb a European capital, Belgrade, 78 straight days to break the country apart. The Russians didn't like that very much. But Putin became president, they swallowed it, they complained, but even Putin started out pro-European, pro-American, actually asked maybe we should join NATO. When there was still the idea of some kind of mutually respectful relationship. Then 9/11 came, then came Afghanistan, and the Russians said, yeah, we'll support you, we understand, to root out terror. But then came 2 other decisive actions. In 2002, the United States unilaterally walked out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. This was probably the most decisive event, never discussed in this context. But what it did was trigger the US putting in missile systems in Eastern Europe that Russia views as a dire, direct threat to national security by making possible a decapitation strike of missiles that are a few minutes away from Moscow. And we put in 2 Aegis missile systems. We say it's defense. Russia says, how do we know it's not Tomahawk nuclear-tipped missiles in your silos? You've told us we have nothing to do with this. And so we walked out of the ABM treaty unilaterally in 2002, And then in 2003, we invaded Iraq on completely phony pretenses, as I've explained. In 2004-5, we engaged in a soft regime change operation in Ukraine, the so-called First Color Revolution. It put in office somebody that I knew and I was friends with, and am kind of distantly friends with President Yushchenko, because I was an advisor to the Ukrainian government in 1993, 94, 95. And then the U.S. had its dirty hands in this. It should not meddle in other countries' elections. But in 2009, Yanukovych won the election and he became president, and in 2010 on the basis of neutrality for Ukraine. That calmed things down because the U.S. was pushing NATO, but the people of Ukraine on the opinion polls didn't even want to be in NATO. They knew that the country is divided between ethnic Ukrainian, ethnic Russian. What do we want with this? We want to stay away from your problems. So in February 22nd, 2014, the United States participated actively in the overthrow of Yanukovych. A typical U.S. regime change operation, have no doubt about it. And the Russians did us a favor. They intercepted a really ugly call between Victoria Nuland, my colleague at Columbia University now, and if you know her name and what she's done, have sympathy for me. Really. Between her and the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Piot, who's a senior State Department official till today. And they talked about regime change. They said, who's going to be the next government? Why don't we pick this one? No, Klitschko shouldn't go in. It should be Yatsenyuk. Yes, it was Yatsenyuk, and we'll get the big guy, Biden, to come in and do an attaboy, they say, pat him on the back. It's great. So they made the new government. And I happened to be invited to go there soon after that, not knowing any of the background. And then some of it was in a very ugly way explained to me after I arrived, how the U.S. had participated in this. All of this is to say, the U.S. then said, okay, now NATO's really going to enlarge. And Putin kept saying, stop. You promised no NATO enlargement. It's been, by the way, I forgot to mention, in 2004, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, 7 more countries in the not 1 inch eastward. And then, okay, it's a long story, but the U.S. kept rejecting the basic idea, don't expand NATO to Russia's border in a context where we're putting in goddamn missile systems after breaking a treaty. 2019, we walked out of the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty. In 2017, we walked out of the JCPOA, the treaty with Iran. This is the partner. This is the trust building. In other words, it's completely reckless U.S. foreign policy. On December 15th, 2021, Putin put on the table a draft Russia-U.S. security agreement. You can find it online. The basis of it is no NATO enlargement. I called the White House that next week after that, begging them, take the negotiations. Putin's offered something, avoid this war. Oh, Jeff, there's not going to be a war. Just announce that NATO's not going to enlarge. Oh, don't worry, NATO's not going to enlarge. I said, oh, you're going to have a war over something that's not going to happen? Why don't you announce it? And he said, no, our policy is an open door. This is Jake Sullivan. Our policy is an open door policy. Open door for NATO enlargement. That is under the category of bullshit, by the way. You don't have your right to put your military bases anywhere you want and expect peace in this world. You have to have some prudence. There's no such thing as an open door that we're going to be there and we're going to put our missile systems there and that's our right. There's no right to that. We declared in 1823 Europeans don't come to the Western Hemisphere. That's the Monroe Doctrine. The whole Western Hemisphere, after all. Okay, anyway, they turned down the negotiations. Then the special military operation started, and 5 days later, Zelensky says, okay, neutrality. And then the Turks said, we'll mediate this. And I flew to Ankara to discuss it with the Turkish negotiators because I wanted to hear exactly what was going on. So what was going on was they reached an agreement with a few odds and ends. And then the United States and Britain said, no way, you guys fight on. We got your back. We don't have your front, you're all gonna die, but we got your back as we kept pushing them into the front lines. That's 600,000 deaths now of Ukrainians since Boris Johnson flew to Kyiv to tell them to be brave. Absolutely ghastly. So when you think about your question, we have to understand we're not dealing with, as we're told every day, with this madman like Hitler coming at us and violating this and violating that, and he's going to take over Europe. This is complete bogus, fake history that is a purely PR narrative of the US government. And it doesn't stand up at all to anyone that knows anything. And if you try to say a word of this, I got completely cut out of the New York Times back in 2022 after writing my whole life columns for them. Oh, I'd send this, okay. And by the way, online, it's not even space. You know, there's no limit. They could publish 700 words. They would not publish, since then, 700 words for me about what I saw with my own eyes about what this war is about. They won't do it. We're playing games here. So, God forbid, a nuclear power comes at us. I don't know what's going to happen. But we came at them. And we should stop going after China and Taiwan.
Very, very accurate words by Mr. Sachs there, explaining to you exactly how we came to this point. And he's absolutely right. Now, for those of you who need a visual presentation of what not 1 inch to the east looks like, I will now show you a good little visual video from after World War II until 2022. We all know that it's even more blue today in 2024 with the addition of Sweden and Finland. It's rather shocking to watch this, but it exposes the lies abundantly. So, since America promised not 1 inch to the east, then this happened. Take a look. It's rather shocking actually to see it like that. All that blue was promised never to happen. Okay? So while the West was scheming and plotting the demise of the Russian nation in the background, Putin and his military had been preparing for this since the Soviet Union fell. They knew this day would come, and has managed to build a military infrastructure that is unprecedented in the world. It is today considered to be the most powerful military of all time. The West, including the US, does not stand a chance against them, regardless what the fake media spins. The Ukraine operation has proven abundantly that Russia cannot be beaten. They possess weapons that cannot be stopped, hypersonic missiles, and technology that the Americans do not have. The fact of the matter is that while the West became woke and retarded, the East prepared and hardened. A war between the two would end in a very few days, tops. The geniuses at NATO HQ figured that they could take on the Russians by leading a proxy war with the Ukrainian forces to die on the battlefield. This way they would never be accused to fight a hot war with Russia, because that would look really bad. When all they did was to supply the weapons only, and this would not be considered an act of war. Of course it is. America almost nuked the Soviet Union during the Cuban Missile Crisis when they sent bombs over to Cuba. Remember any of that? So how is this any different? What sick reasoning is this? What do we think would happen if China installed their own weapons in Mexico, pointed at the US of A? They would blow them up, of course. So how is this any different? It's absolutely absurd. Again, the memes write themselves. America spent 50 years fighting the USSR just to become a gay, retarded version of it. I agree. What this operation has led to is the absolute disarmament of the West. They have no weapons left. What responsible government would do such a thing? They have disarmed themselves by giving everything to Zelensky just to be blown up by the Russians as soon as the weapons arrived. Russia is now in a position to take over the world, would they choose to do so. But they are not. Ask yourself why that is. Russia speaks of openness to negotiations. The West keeps rambling about nuking Russia and making threats. Russia has not once mentioned the use of nukes in any conflict. You know who has? The West, and Europe in particular. Why do you think that is? Could it be that the Khazarian mafia are seeing their own loss of power, and as a rabid dog stuck in a corner start to lash out? It surely seems that way to me. The adult in the room here is the Russians, not the Western talking heads, that's for sure. We're witnessing the collapse of Western hegemony in real time. Exposed politicians, blackmailed leaders of politics and industry, all with their tails between their legs and not knowing how to get out from under it. The US blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, providing gas and oil to the entire European Union, thus throwing the German economy into an absolute freefall. And they still are in an absolute freefall. Check the news. The media went ballistic, of course, blaming the Russians to blow up their own pipeline. Obviously an asinine thing to say, but they went full steam ahead anyway. Many countries have investigated the issue and came up short, including the Swedish cowards who knew exactly what was going on. When we all know that it was the Americans who had Navy ships doing exercises in the exact same spot just a few months before, and obviously planted the explosives at the time. Then we have this from the Polish foreign minister at the time. Need I say more? This is Radek Sikorski, foreign minister of Poland, tweeting, "Thank you, USA," with a pipeline explosion. He took down that post immediately after, but you know, internet remembers, right? So what is all this? This is not in the interest of the people. Any serious country would have called for action against the perpetrators of this massive crime at the UN, and called for tribunals for this war crime, but nobody in Europe even cares. The entire European Union is in an economic freefall as I write this and talk to you today. We saw Olaf Scholz thanking the US and the NATO alliance for its support when it was NATO that blew up the only source of gas they had. Remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. Now, Europe pretends that they cannot import from Russia at all, while in reality they still had Nord Stream 2 active. There was 2 pipelines. But Nord Stream 2 is closed off. The Russians are willing to open it at any time. But the EU prefers to purchase oil and gas from India that has no production of this commodity whatsoever and is now the main exporter of oil and gas to the EU at astronomical prices. Then they turn to the US, who is sending ships of natural gas and oil over to Europe at 4 times the cost. And you wonder why the European economy is failing. Well, this is why. Where does all that oil and gas come from, by the way? From Russia, of course. You just can't make this shit up. It's too stupid to be stupid. Meanwhile, its people are going hungry because Putin bad. Where are the gallows? How are these morons even remotely allowed to rule over anything at all at this point? Do you see how far the Khazarian mafia tentacles go? They know exactly what the consequences are. And they just don't care. It's demonic. Let's listen to this little clip from Putin himself regarding the Nord Stream. And what he says sounds pretty reasonable to me. Let's go with this clip.
Сохраняется одна ветка Северного потока-2. Она не повреждена. И по ней можно поставлять 27,5 миллиардов кубических метров газа в Европу. Это только решение правительства Федеративной Республики Германия. Больше ничего не надо. Вот сегодня решение, завтра вентиль мы поворачиваем, и все, и газ пошел. Но они же этого не делают. Потому что, как у нас говорят, Вашингтонский обком не разрешает.
Yeah, from the horse's mouth. He has no problem selling oil or gas to Europe. They just have to ask for it. Now, I will show you another 2 clips here. One of Putin himself speaking in 2024 at the BRICS meeting in Kazan. And the other is a commentary of Russell Brand after the famous Tucker Carlson Putin interview that I strongly advise all to watch in full. It's incredible. So let's get some further context from Mr. Putin himself. Right here.
Already talked about security of Russia. I understand what you mean. But is this fair from security standpoint for years to ignore our constant appeals to our partners not to enlarge NATO to the east, to lie into our faces that they would not enlarge, and then they would violate their obligations not to do that? Is this fair to get in our underbelly into Ukraine and to start building there, not to prepare to build, but to start building military bases? Is this fair to stage a coup d'etat that I've mentioned when I answered the question of your counterpart? Ignoring international law, all the principles and norms of international law in the UN Charter when they funded a coup d'etat in another country, in Ukraine, in this particular case, pushing the conflict towards the hot phase. Is this fair from the global security point of view? Is this fair to violate the obligations that were assumed under the OSCE when every country signed the document that says that no one country can have security if it affects the security of any other country? We said that, don't do this. It violates our security, it undermines our security, the NATO enlargement. So is this fair? There is nothing fair about this, and we want this situation changed. And
so that's from Putin himself. I choose not to play the Russell Brand interview here because it's way too long, and I don't think we need it actually, to describe to you what's going on. I think it's abundantly clear at this point. Mr. Sachs has explained it very, very well. So this covers the geopolitical part of the story and what led us to this point in time. Now let's go back a little bit and look at the famous biolabs that we spoke of. What you see on your screen here is the exact location of all these American-sponsored CIA biolabs in Ukraine. And you can guess who's taking them all out now and who has stopped them from operating. Putin. As soon as a special military operation, SMO, started in Ukraine, rumors started floating around regarding American-led biolabs in Ukraine, funded by American taxpayers, which we already saw in previous videos. Cute stuff, indeed. Biological warfare has been banned by the UN Charter for decades, but somehow this does not apply to the Ukraine. Weird. There was much talk and denials from the leaders at the time, until Victoria Nuland, the mastermind herself, was forced to testify in front of Congress in DC and said the following.
Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
Last question.
So yeah, she basically admitted that, yes, we have biolabs. So what? So in a classic move, she obviously deflects blame on the Russians, right? As if the fact that the labs did exist in the first place was not incriminatory in itself. Do you see how this works? These biolabs are illegal. And as the US is involved, that should normally disqualify them from commenting on anything, as they are obviously behind it all along. Now, the first thing the Russians did was to capture these labs and take hold of all materials and secure them from further use. Yes, they are really, really bad, these Russians. Another intriguing part of this story is the China, China rhetoric from Trump himself. During the pandemic, it became very clear that China was the culprit of the virus. If there ever was one, that is. Initially, spread from the Fauci-owned lab in Wuhan. Yes, that has been documented as well. Please check. Now, it turns out that there was a biolab called China in Ukraine. And it seems that this was the lab that initially created COVID. You can see it on your screen. Schiphol, China. That's one of the labs. So, was this the lab that initially created COVID? Could Trump have been signaling this all along? I don't know. But it does tickle my mind, though. The man never says anything without purpose. This is an information war after all. So I hope we shall find out one day. Now, what is really disgusting about this story, however, is the connection to the Biden family. And yes, of course they were involved too. Hunter Biden was deeply involved through his company Meta Biota in the Ukrainian biolabs. This is documented on his famous laptop and has been completely ignored by the media. The Biden crime syndicate runs very, very deep and is more disgusting the further you dig. Thankfully, I have the distinct feeling that all of this has been taken care of by the Q Alliance, and we're all watching a show, as I mentioned before. You did not think he just left and forgot about his precious laptop at a Mac repair center, filled with all this absolutely incriminating evidence, do you? I have a book with all the info on this laptop. It can be found online, and it's absolutely massive. Sure, the guy is an absolute crackhead and an addict, but this seems like a handover of evidence to me. He took the deal and is cooperating with the military. There can't be any doubt about that. He sold out his entire family enterprise with that laptop. So the story about this whole biolabs would go something like this, like what I found here on Twitter. Day 1, there are no Nazis and no biolabs. Day 5, maybe there's a few Nazis. Day 10, okay, yeah, there's a ton of Nazis, but they're good Nazis, and still no biolabs. Day 15, okay, maybe there are a few harmless biolabs. Day 20, what's your problem with Nazi biolabs? Doesn't that sum it up perfectly? Now, as we move on, another couple of topics before this gets too long. Fresh from the loss in Ukraine, the Khazarian mafia puppets leading Europe, NATO, and the US government, in their ultimate wisdom, decided that it would be a great time to expand NATO even further, as if the Russian bear wasn't pissed enough already. With no arms to speak of, an EU that is in economic freefall convinced Finland and Sweden to join NATO, as if that was the wise thing to do in its current circumstance. This move especially infuriates me, as my beloved home country has prided itself on being neutral during World War I and World War II, and has always played an important role as a mediator to manage crises in the past due to its impeccable intelligence and common sense approach to international affairs. When Sweden agreed to this, I knew that my country was lost. Its political establishment had given over the reins to the Khazarian mafia banking elites and given up on any common sense and political maturity. It's a time that will live in infamy forever. I will never forgive my government for that. Not that it ever mattered anyway, but hey. Sweden is controlled by the Wallenberg family, probably one of the richest families in the world, and deeply embedded in the Illuminati and the secret societies for a very long time. They most likely had our Prime Minister Olof Palme murdered on the streets of Stockholm in 1986 due to an arms deal that he rejected. Said all this, I know the deep state runs deep in Sweden, but at least it was an elegant and controlled at the time. This NATO move is just absurd. It makes no sense. It just goes to show the level of panic that is currently occurring in the West. The minions have no leader and are not thinking rationally. The elegance of the Khazarian mafia modus operandi is gone. If Swedish and Finnish politicians have allowed the fake news media to wind them up to the point of joining NATO for a threat to the East that does not even exist, then what does that tell you regarding the characters that are in charge? Where is their reasoning? If I, an idiot on a computer, sitting in Asia, can see through the charade, are you telling me that they cannot? Sweden and Finland have just painted a huge bullseye in front of them. The Sweden I know would have wisely stayed as far away from this issue as possible. I miss the good old times, but as it stands, I cannot pardon this treasonous activity, and I'm going to say gallows are needed in Stockholm too. Unfortunately. Here's a little picture that describes the point exactly. The one on the left here is in Swedish, but you can see the flags and you can see the bear. So a picture itself explains it perfectly. On the left here, we have a tweet from Carl Bildt, ex-prime minister in Sweden. Carl Bildt is a captured and blackmailed Khazarian mafia puppet and Bilderberg associate. He used to be our prime minister. I even voted for him in my dark days when I didn't know better. This idiot says it's been a miserable year for the Russian army on the battlefield in Ukraine. Essentially, it has achieved nothing and taken huge losses. Not only is he completely wrong in this tweet, but even exposes himself as the liar that he is. This is Europe today. They are so disconnected from reality, it's almost at asylum levels at this point. This is what panic looks like. Now, this picture here describes the current situation precisely. Here it says, Russia's economy is weak, but survived 13 rounds of sanctions while in a war. Putin is unpopular, but got 80% of the vote. Russia is isolated, but 32 more countries want to join BRICS. Russian military is weak, weapons old, with untrained soldier, but the entire West can't beat them. Somebody's been fed propaganda, and I think it might be us. Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. The media is completely oblivious to reality. So moving on from one madness to another, this is just an amazing chapter that just keeps on giving. Let's discuss money laundering, a nice and cozy topic. We all know that war is an expensive enterprise, and it should be, not only in lost souls, but in cold hard cash as well. This war is very different. It has a different stench to it. The whole premise of the NATO, US and EU expansion in defending this country is completely insane and absurd. This country is not a member of the EU and is very far from qualifying to even apply. Ursula von der Leyen, another piece of work, is trying her utmost to streamline Ukraine into the EU in order to guarantee its protection. But the country is so hopelessly corrupt that even in Brussels they are skeptical, and that tells a lot. It's not a member of NATO, even though they were trying desperately to make it so, but to no avail. It's obvious that if that would be allowed, Putin would pull the trigger right away. And they're in no position to allow that to happen. If not for anything else, at least for self-preservation. I told you, this is insane. No, this war is about money laundering at its finest, almost at a sublime level of international political elite corruption, right in our faces, as if they're not even ashamed of it anymore. I told you, the elegance is gone. Now they do it in the clear open, like rats or cockroaches. The Khazarian mafia needs to flush out the system of as much money as they can amass in the shortest time possible, printing the currencies into oblivion, sending them to Ukraine to be laundered, and then back to the West so they can secure the wealth in commodities such as gold, etc., maybe even Bitcoin. The amount of cash that they have thrown into this project is astounding, to say the least. The US alone is 200 billion in the hole already, a lot more today, with no apparent return to show for it. The EU, in their infinite wisdom, seized 300 billion in Russian assets kept in European banks and are now pretending that the interest on those assets can be used to be funneled into the war efforts as a loan that can never be repaid by a country that basically does not exist anymore. Sorry, EU, that is illegal. The interest of these assets belong to the asset holder. They do not belong to you. It's really a clown show on steroids, if you ask me. How can anybody take these people seriously? The picture I'm about to show you here shows you the money flow. You have all these countries on the left financing Ukraine in the middle, and Russia stands alone on the right. And somehow, even though all this cash flow and armaments, Russia is still winning. So with all these billions of dollars flowing into the country, guess who's doing better? Well, Russia. All this money is coming back to the puppets of the West, no doubt about it. Russia is just sitting back and watching them eat themselves in the process. It's absolutely astounding. The only reason why Ukraine is so important to defend is because it's their breadbasket. It's been laundering money for ages. Everyone is involved and everyone gets a cut. In the US alone, We know for a fact that Biden, through his son Hunter, was deeply involved in Ukraine. John Kerry's son was involved in Ukraine. Nancy Pelosi's son was also involved. Why is everyone in Ukraine? Sure, the women are gorgeous, I will testify to that. But is that all there is? Or could there be something else going on here? What is happening is that they're all jumping ship, trying to grab as much as they can and hope there will be a place for them on the other side of the unavoidable collapse that I have described before. It's really that simple. Who cares if 700 or 1 million Ukrainians die in the process? They're not relative of theirs, and even if they were, they probably wouldn't care anyway. Zelensky has so far bought more villas and yachts than he can count. That's his ticket out. He will never get to enjoy it, though. The alliance has all of this figured out, and they are letting him run as there's nowhere to go except 6 feet underground, and they know it. I will now show you a list of payments to politicians. Unconfirmed, I agree, but it would make a lot of sense to me. I have seen enough to convince me that this is the case. And what's more important, I have seen these people speak. So these are the people who are getting paid back, and that's only in America. It doesn't even involve Europe. So now, said all that, to round it up, let's go back briefly on the entire sanctions issue. The reason I really believe that the Q alliance is behind it all is the effect that this has on the geopolitical landscape in the last few years. The way Russia, China and Trump has played the Khazarian mafia to expend all their ammunition and all their gunpowder is just magnificent. The entire world now wants to join BRICS. They have seen that what the US is capable to do with their sanctions as a weapon of economic warfare. Saudi Arabia has rejected the petrodollar contract that kept them safe for so long, just to turn around and sign up for a military guarantee with Russia. Does that look like a losing nation to you? The rest of the world is following, as I have described before. The Khazarian mafia is defeated in their own markets. They have indeed been decapitated in their own game, with rules that they set up for the world to follow. Is it dirty? Yeah, you bet it is. But the end result is the same. Kazakhstan, the home of the Khazarian Mafia Illuminati deep state, was taken by Russia even before the Ukraine operation began. Nobody ever mentions this, but I do remember. What were Russians doing in a foreign territory, as this Reuters article describes? Russia sends troops to put down Kazakhstan uprising as fresh violence erupts. January 7, 2022. That was 1 month before they entered Ukraine. Everybody forgot about this, but they took Kazakhstan already before they entered Ukraine. I could write an entire chapter about this country, Kazakhstan that is, but I leave it to you to investigate and research this on your own. My hint is check the architecture of Astana, the Khazarian Mafia headquarters, and see for yourself. It's absolutely magic. I will now play you a video as an appetizer for what you would find if you actually do some simple digging into Astana and what it actually represents. The video below shows how this is the new Washington, D.C., the center of power in this realm. Too bad it has now been taken by the bad and nasty Russians. The Masons must be very disappointed. And it just goes to show that everything I have written in this book is relevant even today. The proof is on the ground. And it's not a conspiracy theory, but conspiracy fact. So let's play this little video here and show you what Kazakhstan is all about.
The ETHEREUM New World Order is in the process of establishing a communistic, socialistic one-world government.
In addition to this new socialistic world government, it will also establish a new religion. This new religion will embrace all the world's religions, but will in fact promote Lucifer as the true God. Those who do not worship the beast spoken of in Revelation and do not accept the mark of the beast will be cut off from society and terminated. Talking about the New World Order and the new one world religion that goes along with it, I want to introduce you to a place called Astana in Kazakhstan. Astana is described as the New World Order's great city, and I'm reading from this website which says, Astana is the capital city of Kazakhstan with an official estimated population of nearly 700,000 people as of March 1st, 2010. Astana is the first large capital being built in the 21st century. The word Astana originates from Persian, Astana from the verb istadan, which means to stand in respect, and literally means threshold, i.e. royal or sacred, when people stand in respect and awe, implying where the court is seated, as in a capital city or a shrine town. What this really means is that Astana is being built as a shrine to the New World Order. Now, we want to have a look at what this means and the symbolism surrounding this, as well as the religious aspects or the religious dimensions to it. The city has been described as a futuristic occult capital being built in a remote and deserted area of the Asian steppes. The city also depicts many instances of sun worship, making one believe that the city is a celebration of the religion. So let's have a look at some of the photographs of the New World Order capital. Now this imagery here, these two pillars that we see, let's see what the website says about these two pillars. It says, this layout is present in a majority of important cities, including Washington, D.C. and Paris. The two golden pillars are believed to represent Masonic symbolism, specifically the two pillars of masonry, Boaz and Jachin. These pillars are featured in all Masonic lodge rooms. Boaz and Jachin were two copper, brass or bronze pillars which stood in the porch of Solomon's temple, the first temple in Jerusalem. Okay, so we see Masonic imagery. Here we can see that the main building, which is sort of the presidential palace, is built along the same lines as Washington, D.C. Now, of course, we know that Washington, D.C. was built totally along occult lines. And we see another view here of the presidential palace. Here we can see what is called the Tree of Life. At the back here, we'll see later that there's a meeting room right at the top here where the world's religions are being united. There's an eagle up there which symbolizes power. We're seeing basically a New World Order, New Age city being built. Okay, so let's carry on. Going inside, we see this globe signed by representatives from 17 religious denominations, and this represents uniting all religions together under the New World Order. Very, 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 very significant. Okay, so we see a clear plan that part of the New World Order is to unite the world's religions without a shadow of doubt. Now, this pyramid is dedicated to the renunciation of violence and to bring together the world's religions. The architect claims that the building has no recognizable religious symbols, but in reality the pyramid is a temple for sun worship, which is the religion of the New World Order. The pyramid is the main symbol of Freemasonry and ancient religious doctrine. Today's elite use these pyramids as symbols of power throughout the world. Las Vegas and Dubai contain similar structures, as do many other cities in the world. Here we have the apex of the pyramid, and this is what we're going to see inside. So the apex is round and covered with sunlight. Images of white doves are embedded in the windows. This is obviously to do with world peace, representing also the unification of world governments and religions in this round circular shape, and the New World Order. So the apex, which is at the top of the pyramid, is the ultimate representation of illumination, which is the spiritual evolution of humanity into this new golden age or era of Aquarius, as we've seen before. Inside we see this meeting room, and we see the sun imagery and eye right in the center of this room. I mean, it couldn't be more clear. This is pure Luciferian worship right here. This is Lucifer being worshipped. And this meeting room here, which is the main room, also has the sun symbolism and or eye in the ceiling, and it is the conference room where the religious leaders of the world meet. But we can see here the sun occupies the whole ceiling. So all about illumination. This is the Tree of Life. And it says this monument is meant to embody a folk tale about a mythical tree of life and a magic bird of happiness. The Tree of Life, as it's called, is a roadmap which spirits supposedly use when they leave the material world to join the afterlife. The golden globe at the top of the monument represents the sun, the supreme deity, and here we have sun worship again. Now inside the gold globe, which is right at the top of that construction there, we have this very strange looking symbol. And it's a gold triangle which represents the president's handprint in the center, the president of this country. But there's something obviously much more mystical here. I believe this has to do with Satan, who the Bible says is the master of this world, or the prince of this world. This person says that the global elites scatter their symbols and doctrines all over the world, and of course the general population fail to recognize what's going on. So, this could signify Satan's mark on the world, or his thumbprint or handprint, making it an impression into this triangle. He's stamping his authority. Ultimately, this is right at the top of this Tree of Life. So, once again, we have the shrine to Luciferianism, to illumination, that Satan is in fact the light bearer and the bringer of light to humanity and spiritual life to humanity. Here we have a helix shape. The helix has to do with the DNA of mankind, and one of the very significant things that you're going to find when you start studying the occult and what's happening in this New Age One World religion is the fusion of the sons of God with the daughters of men, i.e. the fallen angels being fused with humans to form these new superhumans, again this concept of transhumanism. And I'm sorry to say it, but it also is in the shape of a male sexual organ, which is very significant in things like Freemasonry, because most of the occult religions have to do with fertility cults. So man is building a shrine to himself. Lucifer is being glorified as the god of this world. And here we have this new age, new century city being built to glorify man. Without any shadow of doubt, this is very pagan, very occultic, and is a sure sign of where things are heading.
So, I put Kazakhstan and Astana in the end of this chapter because I want you to understand that the war has already been won. Ukraine is just a pantomime. As you saw in the video, the capital of Astana was built under Masonic rule, just like Washington, D.C. Astana was supposed to become the new headquarters for the New World Order. They would move away from D.C. and relocate to Kazakhstan and basically come back to the beginning, to where they come from, the home of the Khazarian mafia. So no wonder Putin feels so confident in everything that he's doing, because he's already beaten them in their own home. Okay? So the war is already over. World War IV has already been won. And we are now just living the convulsions of a dead organization here. So in not too long of a time, I think we will see the end of this. We're going to move on to the next chapter, the next show, chapter 13.8, The War That Ends All Wars, Israel Saved for Last. We couldn't miss that, could we? Q said it very clearly, Israel saved for last, and that's what we will go into in the next chapter. So I hope the Ukraine situation is clear for you and that you understand the underlying conditions of why we are where we are. That's all for me today. Max out, and peace.